All right, welcome to another day in the 67 steps, the 67 mental frameworks you're going to need to find the good life. All right, today we're talking about Picasso's rising tide and the law of 33%, using mentors to shave years off your learning curve. Again, another one of the foundational steps in this 67 steps in these 67 rules, okay? One of my favorites, one of the ones that I get asked about the most when I'm speaking. We're going to hit on all kinds of things related to mentors, why you need them, who they should be, how you can find them, the reward and the punishment, the reward of having a mentor, the right person, the pitfalls of not having one or having the wrong person. So let's start by saying this. Some of you have heard my TED talk and heard my story. I was 16 years old, and I realized life was confronting me with a tremendous array of options. You've probably felt this, depending on how old you are. I don't care if you're old or young. You still are confronted with an array of options every day. Who you're going to marry, who you're going to date, diet you're going to follow, who you're going to read about, who you're going to aspire to be like, how you're going to change, what political view you're going to follow, what religion, what spiritual understanding, all these things. And I was 16 and I said, you know what I want? I want one person that has all the answers. So I wrote a letter to the smartest person I knew at the time, my grandfather. He was a chemist and PhD and smart chess master. He had a 20,000 book library and one of the top PhDs in the United States. And I was like, surely this guy knows the answer. So I wrote him a letter. His name is Charles. And I said, Charles, life has so many hard questions. I need someone to give me the answers. I just want to find one person. And I'll never forget, 4 days later, I got a letter back from him and it said, sorry, Ty, you're never going to find all the answers from one person. The world is too complicated. The modern world's too hard. He said, if you're lucky, at best, you're going to find a handful of people who point the way. And if you remember that story, I know a lot of you know. I don't want to repeat it if you do know it, but he sent me a set of books. The Story of Civilization from Will and Ariel Durant, a 9,000-page volume set of books that they had written about the story going back to BC times all the way to 1800s, the story of humans. And I didn't get at the time why he had sent me these old books. I was like, what are these old, kind of cobweb ridden books? And I'm like, what is going on? And then I realized now, I only realized now in retrospect that what he was trying to say is the answers are not within. The answers you're seeking are going to come through a set of knowledge that you can go out and find. So over the years, I was lucky enough to become acquainted with various people that became mentors to me. I really had 5 mentors. Most of my success, 90% of my success, comes definitely and almost unavoidably, unfortunately. Sometimes we all want to take credit for our own success, but if I look through the voices that run through my head on a daily basis in terms of how I make decisions, hopefully good decisions, it's generally the voice of one of these mentors. One of them was Joel Salatin, Alan Nation. Some of these people you've known if you've read, Joel Salatin was a pretty famous guy now, been in National Geographic, I think he'll be named in the next century one of the 100 or 200 most important people of our century. Alan Nation was a mentor in some ways to Joel. If you read the book Omnivore's Dilemma, the best-selling book, it has both a chapter about Alan Nation and Joel Salatin. And I had other mentors, and I continue to develop mentors. And why? Well, at some point in my life, I developed this internal guideline, the law of 33%. All right? We're going to talk about that. But before I do, I want to remind you of a quote that Pablo Picasso, the great artist, possibly the most well-known artist of our time, certainly the most prolific, probably. He did about 50,000 pieces of art during his life. Produced that much art, pretty tough. And he said, good artists copy and great artists steal. Good artists copy, great artists steal. Remember, we've talked about humility. You know, like Sam Walton getting on his hands and knees, ended up in jail in Brazil. In the same way, this vein, this line of thought of the humility that it takes to be like Pablo Picasso, to say, good artists copy, but the great artists steal. What he meant by steal was building on the shoulders, like they say about Sir Isaac Newton. I think he said something along the lines of, if I'm great, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. If you feel tall, it's probably because you're standing on the shoulders of giants. The human mind is built not to learn in the way you and I were taught. We were taught in school, if you remember, that humans learn visually, humans learn auditory, some of them, and some humans learn in what's called the kinesthetic method, which is doing. But the truth is, I believe, it's the fourth methodology. It's we learn by osmosis. When I lived on a farm with Joel Salatin, and there was these, with the Amish, 2.5 years, I remember I was out in a field, I don't know what I was doing, walking by, and I saw a mother cow with a baby cow, and it dawned on me as I was developing out this concept of the law of 33%, as I was beginning to understand what Pablo Picasso said. Even though I'd had a mentor, I didn't understand the repercussions of these mentors or the repercussions they would have and the positive they would do later in my life. And I saw this cow and I realized, man, audio, no, that mother cow never talks to the baby cow. It's not audio. It's not visual necessarily. I mean, mother cow's not kind of pointing out things to the baby cow and say, hey, look at this. I only eat this grass and not that dandelion. And it wasn't kinesthetic. It wasn't that the calf was just learning by doing. No, it was by osmosis. Over the years, that baby calf would spend a couple of years with the mother cow. It would just kind of rub off the way that cow walked, the things that it did or avoided. The calf just kind of subtly picked it up. And I believe that this is the dominant form of learning. And I believe that the modern school system has robbed us of so much, not because the teachers didn't mean well, not because the education system is full of bad people. It's not. It's full of amazing people. But when the system's broken, it doesn't matter how great the person is and how great their intentions are. So the system that you and I grew up with is you sit in a classroom and somebody uses either audio, talking to you, visual, pointing on a board, or kinesthetic. Sometimes they're like, hey, you come up on the board and you do this chemistry experiment, or you point out, do the math on the chalkboard. I believe all three of those, while they do have a place in education and knowledge, they are not the best way to learn. So part of the 67 steps for you to get what you want, you're going to have a framework of learning on the fly, of learning quickly. We talked about the changeability, the blue-footed booby bird. You're going to have to know how to change on a dime. That entails what? That entails the ability that you must have to learn. Okay? You're going to have to learn. So the reason that Pablo Picasso and the rising tide and the law of 33% is so important is because you must, to get what you want, be a continual learning machine. Richard Dawkins speaks of this in his book from 1976, The Selfish Gene. One of the most important books, whether or not you believe in everything that he says. He basically says, he goes through in some of the early chapters why we as humans have a mind that is so, what's the word? Well, let me just read you this. He says early in the book, one way for our genes to solve the problem of making predictions in rather unpredictable environments. So let me just step back. He was saying that the reason that humans could be born with just innate knowledge, right? You could just be born and you come out of your mother's womb and you instantly know English. Well, the only problem with that of our genes setting up, our instincts being set up that specific, is that what if you were born in China? Then you would be born speaking the wrong language. So instead, you and I as humans are born with innate capacity to learn. When we are born, we're not hardwired with one specific language. We're just hardwired with the ability to pick up any language, right? So that's what Dawkins is saying. One way for genes to solve the problem of making predictions in this case of what language to speak, in rather unpredictable environments, meaning we could be born anywhere, is to build in a capacity for learning. So you and I, the thing that makes us human is our built-in capacity for learning. So if you don't get this right, to me, you're not a human. The full human experience is in understanding and capitalizing upon this capacity that you have for self-learning. So he continues on. The advantage of this sort of programming, meaning self-learning, is that it greatly cuts down the number of detailed rules that have to be built into the original program, meaning us. And it is also capable of coping with changes in the environment that could not have been predicted in detail. Right? Listen to that. Coping with changes in the environment that could not have been predicted in detail. Remember I said in a previous one, you're going to have changeability. It's one of the, we've gone through different things, and you've got to have the worth a damn factor. You've got to have changeability. You've got to have humility. Now we're coming to the learning methodology. And Picasso laid it out. He just said, hey, good artists copy, great artists steal. Sir Isaac Newton, standing on the shoulders of giants. As John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide raises all ships. If you can hitch your life to the right horse, if you can jump on the right boat, if you can stand on the right shoulders, you automatically vault and rocket forward in terms of where you stand. And also, as we said, you experience more of the true human experience as a self-learning machine. So this, as I said, is foundational for you to understand. Many people listen to the things I say, and they know I read, a book a day. People know me for that, and they think, oh, that's how Ty learns. He just reads a book a day. So I'm just going to read a book a day. I had someone the other day saying, Ty, I listened to 34 hours of your podcasts in 2 days. I just turned it on. And that's great, and it's flattering to have people say that. But the goal is for you guys not to listen to me. I'm a human full of fallible ideas and fallible concepts, that some of them I might be teaching you that are incorrect. Now, the ultimate for you as you get through this 67 steps, these 67 days, is that you walk out of it with not only understanding things, but the capacity to continue to learn, not just like most people learn, not slowly, not just by opening a book, not just by listening to a podcast, not just by going to a seminar, although all of those things are great and I'm all for it. There's something even beyond that, and that's the ability of that's the ability for you and the skill for you to pick up in-person mentors who then teach you through osmosis. They rub off on you. Just imagine this. I have a business partner, one of the top real estate developers in the world, has made just immensely large amount of money. We're talking, close to $1 billion level stuff, and for sure billions of dollars worth of deals. When I first met him, you would say, well, Ty, you just, go to dinner and you get all these answers from him. Well, that's true. And like Jim Rohn says, poor people should take rich people to dinner. So I was poor at the time. It would make sense for me to go take him to dinner and learn. Okay, that's valid. But what else? Go further. You ever heard the saying that 70% of human communication is nonverbal? Well, probably to some level that's true. Imagine the things that I learned by being in person with this business partner. I learned how he walks, how he carries himself, how quickly he speaks when he's doing business, and how quickly he speaks when he's not doing business, the tone of voice that he speaks in, how he handles the aggression of other people. Over and over, countless lessons that I could only learn through a mentor that I was spending time with. Let me give you a few little caveats here. What do I mean by mentors? Well, for those of you, some of you are in my more business-focused coaching programs, and there I teach how to build an advisory board to sit to build your own cabinet for your business. That's a little different. An advisory board is a little more informal, very helpful. They might not be in the specific area of life that or business that you want to be in, but you learn from a wide variety of people. You could have a lawyer and a doctor and a teacher and a priest and a politician. That could be on your board of advisors. What we're talking about in this step is mentors specifically. So the role of mentors is the closer they are, the closer they've gotten to get a result that you want. Let's say your result is you want to have 10% body fat, lean, mean machine body. You want to have wife or husband, 3 kids, live in the suburbs. Like you need if that's the goal you're trying to get as your outcome, or that the end game you're seeking, then I recommend you get mentors that are 10 to 20 years ahead of you and have that. And then as you're around them, their mannerisms, their subtle characteristics that are all important. One of the things Alan Nation, my mentor, told me is, Ty, the problem most people have with copying is they pick and choose what they'll copy about. But he said, you can't really pick and choose, because how do you know which is the ingredient that makes that person effective? So if you copy 60% of somebody, that's great, but maybe you're copying the 60% of uncorrelated, unimportant parts, right? So you need mentors that are going down the same path you want to, and ideally are far along that path. And I had people like that. And so they begin to mold you, right? And the rising tide of their life begins to raise you up. I get one of the most common questions. I'm getting, to the point where I can't quite answer everybody's questions. I'm getting hundreds at a time, but is I'm this age. Sometimes it's real young, like I'm 18, and sometimes it's like, hey, I'm 60. And it's always kind of the same theme. It's like, if you were me, I teach this, the question you want to ask. So some people ask me my own question back. It's like, hey, Ty, how do I pull this thing off called life? And I really want to say, well, figure out your end game. A lot of that's talked about in the 67 steps, but the kind of key, or one of the keys at some point, in order for you to learn, remember I said we're programmed, humans are programmed with only so much information at birth. If you come to me now, it's not like I can just say to you, oh, I have all the answers. I don't. You might want an outcome I know nothing about. What if you want to be a Grammy award-winning musician? I don't know anything. I mean, I know success principles I've learned from others, but I can't be your exact mentor. I could be maybe an advisor or a mentor of sorts, but you also need to find a mentor that's close and has already ideally won a Grammy. Like Ellen DeGeneres is the pretty well known, I think she's the #1 talk show host now on TV, or at least daytime TV. And guess what? She's smart. She went out and got Oprah. So Ellen's a woman. She didn't get mentored just by a man, although it can be different genders. But in this case, she's sticking to the rule pretty closely. She found Oprah, who's 20 or 30 years ahead, who has the outcome that Ellen wants, a successful TV show, impact in that way with her interviews and all that. She picked a woman. They're similar in many ways. It's a pretty smart person. For yourself, remember, as you pull these mentors together, and you pull the right people together who are already far along that path that you're specifically trying to go down, they're going to pull you without even knowing. It's going to get a lot easier. It's like when you're riding a bike, you see people riding like in the Tour de France, or you see people riding down the highway in their bikes, and they do what's called drafting, where they get next to like other bike riders, or they get next to 18-wheelers, and by doing so, the draft, the air turbulence and resistance is lessened. You see birds doing that, geese, when they're flying in that V formation. It's so that and they take turns, but the first bird is taking the slack, the air turbulence, or I should say friction, and making it easier on those who are going behind. That's what you need from your mentors, and that's what you're going to get. This is the law of 33%. Now, let's talk specifically on the law of 33%. What is the law of 33%? It says practicality. How do we make this real? Well, you can't spend all your time with mentors. It's not realistic and practical for you to spend the rest of your life always in the presence of people 10 or 20 years ahead of you. At some point, you're going to have to accomplish for yourself. At other points, you're going to have to get a job and just pay the bills temporarily while things kick in as you try to become more successful and move up the chain. So during that period of time, obviously, you got to allocate some time to not be with amazing people. So the law of 33% means basically divide your waking hours. You're awake on average about 16 hours a day. Divide that in thirds, 33% each. That's how many hours you should spend first with people below you. Okay? People say, why, Ty? Why should I spend 4 or 5 hours with people below me? Why that 33%? Well, that 33% is important. They help you build self-esteem. It's going to be hard to be people always way ahead of you. You want to be able to boost your self-esteem to know that some people are doing worse than you. I don't mean that in an elitist way, but because you can help them. Those are the people you mentor. Remember, life is a continuum. It's a spectrum. It's not like you're ever going to completely be somewhere. So along the path, you can be helping people who are 20 years behind you. Right? So that's the first law of 33%, 4 or 5 hours a day. Then you should be spending 4 or 5 hours a day around people on your level. Those are people, like Mahatma Gandhi says in his autobiography, as you rise to the top, as you go up, you're going to lose some friends. You're going to lose some family members. You're going to lose some people. Like Jesus Christ said, he who loves family, father and mother more than me is not worthy than me. Right? I'm not religious per se, but I like that quote. And I think you should understand that this path you're going on with these 67 steps is going to take you to a new place. And as you go up, like Gandhi said, it can be lonely. So you're going to need 33% of your time around people who are on your level. These will be your closest friends. They're similar to you. They're coping with the same trials and tribulations. And like Jonathan Haidt, the great author and professor from NYU and author of The Happiness Hypothesis, I was talking to him on the phone recently, and he said, you know, Todd, friendships are forged through adversity. True, he called it companionative love. True companionative love has to have come through some trial and tribulation. So that's why I say people on your level who are currently going through the trial and tribulation, as you go through life with them, those will be the deep-seated and deeply forged loyal relationships. And most people, these first two categories of 33%, that's what you spend most of your time with, right? If I'm not careful, that's where I spend most of my time. People below me or people on my level. Because those people you feel comfortable with, you don't feel uncomfortable around people below you because you feel good about yourself. But the most important is this last of the law of 33%. This last group. You must spend 33% of your waking time as close as you can. Obviously, it's not an exact number of hours, but as closely as possible with people 10 to 20 years ahead of you, and ideally people in a very similar track. If you want music, they're music people. If you want restaurants, they're restaurant people. If they're business, you want business. If they're pro athletes, you're an athlete, you want athletes. Of course, you'll get some mentors over. It's not a black and white line, right? I talk about the 500-year-old archaic mind. Don't think archaically black and white about this. It's not like that's an exact mentor and that's not. There's often blurry gray areas to them. The point being, and the seminal, the heart of the matter, is that these people must be 10 to 20 years down the path that you want. That's what gets them prioritized. That's what gets them classified as a true mentor. Okay? Now, we're going to talk about some things about this. But I want to say, and I want to warn you now, there is a definition that I have to these people, whether you know you will be with the right group of people. It might be one, it might be a group. It's like working out at a gym. No pain, no gain. I just saw that Hercules movie with The Rock, and he's a big dude. He got that through pain. He was that movie with Mark Wahlberg, Pain or Gain. You're gonna have to have the heart, the character, to know that it's gonna be a little tough. And the masses of people, the average person or the ordinary person that you don't want to be, that's why you're in the 67 steps, they can't handle that. So what do? They always shy away from situations where they feel uncomfortable. Or even worse, what most people do when they get around people that are far above them, they either have envy or they either make fun of them by saying, oh, that person probably cheated to get where, oh, that person, they're what I call haters. You can't be one of those. You're going to have to be somebody who sees with a clear eye, with no delusion. Like Freud says, life is often intolerable for us. And so we cover it up with diversionary tactics, with intoxicants, with substitutive effects. You can't do that. You got to see it's clearly like that person's way ahead of me. They got there through hard work. I feel uncomfortable around them because they make me feel bad about myself a little bit. Because remember I talked about Will Durant says J.S. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, the greatest possible, possibly and most likely the greatest musician of all time. Why was he? When you study his life, well, there was a time when he worked in a city, I think it was called Kathen in Germany, Kathen, and he became restless and moved on to a new city. That restlessness, that not feeling comfortable, it's okay. You don't have to shy away from that. So if you get around people and you feel uncomfortable because it's like, I don't understand the languages people are saying, they make me feel weird, they're kind of high pressure in the sense that they like turn to me and go, did you know that? And like all of a sudden you can't perform. Well, that's like lifting weights. If you're lifting weights that have no pain, if you got a 2-pound weight, it's funny, my grandma's 96 and I go down to her place in La Jolla in San Diego and she has 1-pound weights. And I'm thinking, Grandma, how does a 1-pound weight? That's like lifting a plastic bag. But you're not going to get big biceps by lifting my grandma's 1-pound weights. You're not going to get the good life by lifting mentally 1-pound weights. You're going to have some friction. You don't need to go crazy with it and pull a muscle in your brain, but you need to push yourself, and it needs to be continual step up, step up, step up. And when you feel uncomfortable, get excited. Because like Tony Robbins says, when you succeed, you party. But when you fail, you ponder. When you have the pain, you're growing. So you're lifting this mental weight when you're around these people. I remember when I was, I think 19, 20 years old, I was in Mississippi, and Jackson, Mississippi. And somehow I got invited out with one of these mentors. I think it was Alan Nation and a couple other, I can't remember if Alan was there, but it was all these top business people. And they had rented a cabin and were going hunting or something and said, hey, you want to go along? These were all guys in their 50s and 60s. And I went along, and it was interesting. I remember they had some beers at night, and they were all sitting around a fireplace just talking and telling stories, and we were eating. And they got a little drunk, not super drunk, but one of them turned to me and he asked me, we were talking about investing and ROI, return on investment, and so on, all these financial terms. And I kind of felt weird. I didn't know what they were talking about, right? I felt pushed, stressed. But one of them turned to me and was like, what's the ROI on your business, Ty? I'd started a little business at that time. And I remember going, what is ROI? And all of them turned and just laughed at me. Maybe they asked IRR, which is a little more complex term, internal rate of review, return. And I was like, oh man, I don't know the answer to this. And I like tried to say, I don't know. And they just laughed at me. And it kind of like I became like the one they were making fun of for the next half hour and just talking about how stupid people in the world. And I was just feeling worse and worse and worse. And I remember one of them turned to me and was like, you know what? You don't know ROI, you're never going to do anything with business and money. And I remember, I'm a pretty manly man, and I remember that's about as close as I'd gotten to crying for years. I was in my early 20s, but I was like, all these people I respect just laughing at me. But see, that was the law of 33%. In effect, I was there, I was being pushed. Humans are stubborn. Don't forget, like Dr. Sharon Molam told me, the best-selling author of the book Inheritance, about our genes. He says the way our genes work is that they use enzymes to as catalysts to cause us to take actions, behaviors. And he says enzymes are very expensive for your body to make. So your body doesn't make them if it doesn't have to. That's why if you lift weights, right, or go jogging, it's actually healthy because you have osteoclasts and osteoblasts in that eat your bones or decay your bones and then rebuild them stronger. So if you're not jogging, you get older, you get osteoporosis. Your skeleton frame weakens because your body, it's not a negative thing. Your body is trying to conserve, your genes are conserving enzymes. You don't use it, you lose it. So you see what was happening, the law of 33% back there when I was around that fireplace, is I had gotten into a lull. I had gotten into equilibrium, a low-level equilibrium where I wasn't pushing myself. And I needed that uncomfortable stress to push me. Now notice, you wouldn't want all your life that way because it'd be too stressful. That's why I call it the law of 33%. A good mentor, sometimes you're going to feel uncomfortable around. Don't fall into the myth that a mentor is some person that just lovey-dovey and get you cookies, and you go to their house and you sit down at the table and you have milk and cookies, and they tell you a few little parables and stories, and oh, just do your best and everything's gonna, like, that's not a mentor. My experience with mentors is they're generally busy people. The good ones are actually doing something, so they're not professional teachers, which means when they're not professional teachers, that means they're a little rough around the edges. They're not always efficient at teaching you. They might not know how to convey a message. It's your job as the student to be able to get out of them what it is they're trying to teach you. They might do it in a very sloppy way. They might be mean. If you read, Bill Gates, when he was the CEO of Microsoft, he would make grown men cry. He would yell. Jeff Bezos at Amazon, the same thing. Donald Trump, all these guys, these powerful people. And not just those people, but you see it throughout history. People like Alexander the Great, trust me, these guys were tough to work for. I think he ended up at one point killing his best friend. And I'm not advocating that level, but I'm saying, hey, we're talking real world here. I'm not talking about what should be. I'm talking about what is. And in that world, you're going to be surrounded by mentors over time who may not be professional mentors. That's what you want anyway. You don't want if you want professional teachers, go to college. But if you want to learn in the trenches from self-made people, you go out there and understand they're rough around the edges, so you better toughen up a little bit. I've talked about this. This law of 33%, it sounds easy, and it is simple, but it's not always easy, because you and I are oftentimes full of too much blank, blank, and blank. For some of us, it's being stubborn and not changeable. We've talked about that. For other people, it's not having Sam Walton level humility. For others, it's not even being aware. You're just wandering through life. You have no worth a damn factor. You have no set of intangibles in character. Whatever it is, a good mentor, and over time, these mentors you're going to learn by osmosis, both through conflict with them making fun of you, them angry at you, and at the flip side, them teaching you. Remember, Bill Gates, although he put many grown men to tears, he also made a heck of a lot of millionaires, maybe the most. There was a tremendous reward of working with Jeff Bezos, although he was a tough guy to work with. All throughout. Sometimes you find mentors that are naturally socially adept. Oftentimes you don't. Boy, Joel Salatin was a great man and was socially adept, but you didn't cross him. Okay? He wasn't there to be my professional teacher. It was like Joel used to say, I don't mind carrying a man, but I don't want him to drag his feet. He was there to do stuff. He was doing stuff. Those are the best mentors. So this law of 33%, as I said, there's a little warning that I'm giving you. It might not always be easy, but like Tom Hanks says in, I think it's Big League or one of these baseball movies he did once, where the Gina Davis or one of the actresses in the movie, the character, she's quitting, her and her husband working or playing baseball. And Tom Hanks says, why? And he said, well, because it's tough. It's too hard. And Tom Hanks says, no, you want it to be tough. You want it to be hard. The hard is what makes it great. You want a great life? You got to be able to toughen up and take a little bit. You want a mentor? You're going to have to toughen up and realize the best mentors are not saints. If you want a saint, you can go to church. If you want a mentor, you find a mentor. Some mentors are like Philip, right? King Philip. He trained his son Aristotle. King Philip was rough around the edges. Killed a lot of men in battle. This was not a saint, but when it comes to Alexander the Great, went on to conquer the world. Okay? We've talked about this in other places, but just to rehash, you can't look for perfection in mentors, and I think it bears saying for this conversation. Another pitfall as we continue to move through this concept of following Picasso's rising tide and the law of 33% and using mentors. Another pitfall, I just said, one of them, if you're writing this down, is not being able to handle the stress of feeling uncomfortable, feeling a little pain, feeling a little burn when you're around them. The second is the pitfall of looking for perfection. I know people that have met mentors and then just I meet them later. I had a friend that did this. He's like, I'm so disappointed. I'm like, what happened? It's like, that guy that was helping me with real estate or something. It's like, I found out whatever I don't remember what it was, like got divorced or had a nasty divorce with his wife, and he's like, I just don't like people. I want to learn from somebody who, has a stable marriage. And I was like, well, what are you trying to learn from him? It's like business. I'm like, well, Look, if you're looking for perfection, my friend, you will be spending a lot of years trying to find perfection with no avail. Forget it. You need someone you're just going to pick what you can. And although I did say you want to be careful about picking and choosing, obviously if someone has a major character flaw and something they don't even like about their own life, you don't have to copy that. Now, somebody might say, Ty, I don't want to learn from somebody who doesn't have all their stuff together. Well, like I said, there is no black and white. There's no 500-year-old archaic mind. All right, this isn't the Middle Ages, the medieval times. Just understand that there's no right mentor or wrong mentor. There's just ones that on a scale of 1 to 10 are better to bet on. So the fact that they have something wrong with them, you be the judge. Just understand if you move on to someone else, that comes with a cost too. You might find somebody even worse. Or you might, what I think, more likely, never find anybody. So be careful. It's a pitfall of looking too deeply. Steve Jobs helped many people. He helped Mark Zuckerberg. But if you know the personality of Steve Jobs, he had a tremendous kind of, crazy streak to him. Okay? A lot of people, I went and saw that movie Jobs with Ashton Kutcher. And by the way, if you look on the site, my site, tylopez.com, I have added a new section, movies. You should look at some of these movies I recommend, because these are great ways to get frameworks for mentors. The best, of course, is Karate Kid. I can talk about that a little later. I love Karate Kid for the model of what a good mentor is like, the original Karate Kid. But one of the other movies is this Jobs movie with Ashton Kutcher, and you see there this level of craziness, and that he kind of deserted his daughter for many years. You're tempted. A person could be tempted to go, oh, well, I don't want to learn from somebody who abandoned his daughters. Well, that's too black and white of thinking. He's just a man. You're just a man or a woman. You're not looking. If you are looking for a saint, specifically, you want to be the next Mother Teresa, well, then you may have to find a saint. But if you're looking for other things, health, wealth, love, these big picture issues, you're not going to find perfect people. So let's keep going. That's the pitfall. And I know I talked about that a lot, but it bears repeating because so many people get lost in this. Everybody I talk to seems to agree with the concept that you need a mentor. I don't have much friction for that, but it's, like they say, the devil's in the details. When I start laying out how to do it, people are like, well, I don't want that person. I don't want that. And they just start going crazy. So I want to say that I want to also now at this point remind you, in case you don't understand the full, the entirety of this message in terms of the impact mentors have. I want to step back for a second and just show you. Let's go through a list of people, and you try to tell me if they had a mentor or not. Let's just start. I'll do a trick question maybe. One of these is going to be a trick. It'll be somebody who actually didn't have a mentor that I know of. Einstein. Albert Einstein. Maybe the greatest scientist of the last century. Yes or no? Answer, yes. Every Thursday growing up, he had a mentor that he ate lunch or dinner with, the mentor and his family, when Albert Einstein was young. Jay-Z, the rapper, married to Beyonce, the billionaire. Again, yes. I think her name was Leor Cohen. She showed him that he had a talent with words and lyrics and rhyming. What about Bill Gates? Yes. He had a mentor. What about, let's say, the guy, Jack Dorsey, who started Twitter? Again, yes. What about, let's go away from just business people. What about Martin Luther King Jr.? Answer, yes. He had a mentor, a PhD, a doctor at a university, mentored him. What about the Dalai Lama, a spiritual person? Again, he was mentored by Mahatma Gandhi. What about business? Jeff Bezos. He, interestingly enough, and we're going to talk about this, using books as mentors. You can do that. You need some in person. Jeff Bezos used books to follow Sam Walton, Made in America, because Sam Walton was no longer around, was dead by that time, basically. late 90s or 90s or whatever. How long do I have to go? I can go forever. Alexander the Great, one of the great conquerors of all time. Well, I said he was mentored by his father, Philip of Macedon, but the Macedonian, but even more important, from 14 to 16, he was mentored by Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of all time. Taught him to think. And he went on at 19, before he was 30 years old, conquered most of the known world. But interestingly enough, Aristotle was mentored by who? Believe it or not, by Plato. And Plato was mentored, if you believe it, by Socrates. And the pattern is never ending. Ray Kroc learned from the McDonald's brothers. J.W. Marriott Jr. learned from his dad. J.R. Simplet, the billionaire, learned from his father. Sometimes your father's your mentor. I can go through a list that almost never ends. I've done the research and it's mind-blowing. Michael Jordan, he learned by watching David Thompson, and then through his many coaches, Phil Jackson and Dean Smith. This is the pattern that works. It's almost irrefutable. It works along not only, quote unquote, pie in the sky, it sounds great, warm fuzzies, but there's also science behind it. If you don't believe me, like I said, get animals and watch how they learn. We learn in the same way. Like Dawkins says, this innate capacity is absolutely important. Now, prototype I really like, because we're going to get into some specifics, because I really get asked all the time, how do you specifically tie? What do I do to get a mentor? Well, let's break out. We said the law of 33%. We're talking specifically about the last section of 33% type people, which is the people 10 to 20 years ahead of you. So how do you think of this? Think of it this Karate Kid movie back in the 80s. Daniel's son, interesting enough, Johnny from that movie was over at my house in Hollywood recently. I was in awe. I was like, oh, I hated you when I was young. You were the bad guy in this movie. But if you remember the story, Daniel moves to Encino, LA, and he gets picked on and gets beat up, and the maintenance man at his office or at his apartment sees him getting beat up and says, you need to learn karate, and starts to train him. But the interesting thing is he begins to train him by saying, I want you to wash my car, and I want you to paint the fence. And Daniel slowly does it, kind of begrudgingly over time. But you know what happens? Over time, all of a sudden, he's angry at the mentor. And he says to Mr. Miyagi, he says, why are you just having me do all this cleaning? I'm not learning anything. And all of a sudden, the best scene in the movie, Mr. Miyagi says, stand here, paint the fence. And Daniel's son starts painting the fence in front of him, the motion. And Mr. Miyagi throws different punches, and they're blocked by the painting the fence motion. So all of a sudden, Mr. Miyagi shows that even though Daniel had lost faith in him, that he was actually being a loyal and faithful mentor to Daniel. And Daniel was shocked, because the way he learned was not the way he thought it would be learned. And so, as I said in the pitfalls, you are not only going to learn from people who aren't perfect, you're also going to learn in ways that you can't understand, and that's okay. Now, someone might say, well, I might have a mentor and I'm an intern and he just sticks me in a room and has me buy coffee. Well, there are extreme cases where a mentor is not helping you, but remember, even then, you can look across the room and see how they walk, how they talk. You have to become the learning machine. So the next pitfall, if you're writing these down, you cannot take the mentality that person is going to turn, face you, and spend their time learning. You must become an absorption machine. This is the key. And sometimes you'll get little teeny glimpses only. You only see them for 5 minutes a day. But if you're smart and you're efficient with the learning and your absorption, that might be all the time you need in the world to learn that day's lesson from that mentor. You have to be persistent. Another pitfall. And now we're moving towards the actual practical steps. The first most important practical step is remember what Alexander the Great said. Nothing is impossible to him who will try. You must try. You must try. I did a talk at my house, and one of the students there and friend of mine, I think going to be one of the top producers, but still starting out here in Hollywood. He said, Ty, I heard this talk, and I went out and I wrote some emails. The next thing you know, I was having lunch with Elon Musk. worth $8 billion. Had him come to his office, right? So for you, nothing is impossible if you will try. You might not get the first thing you try. So make a list of mentors who are 10 to 20 years ahead of you, who, although not perfect, you can stand their infallible ways, right? Don't pick someone that just bothers you so much, that has so over the top differences in worldview than you. But they're not perfect, but you're willing to deal with it, okay? And then just try and try again. You know, there's this story of the persistent widow where a woman, her husband had died unfairly, unjustly. And every day the judge walked by her house and she would walk out the house and say, please avenge the unjust murder of my husband. And the judge would ignore and ignore. But every day she would say that over and over and over. And finally the judge turned to her and he said, look, I'm going to help you. Not because I really care about you or the unjust, quote unquote, case of your husband, but I'm afraid of you, that you're going to do something crazy. Now, I'm not suggesting you become a stalker, but I'll tell you, I told this story before. One of my mentors now, one of the top, another guy, real estate. He said when he was, 19 years old, he realized he wanted to be in real estate. He found a realtor who was in the area and the best developer in that little town. And he said he walked over to that developer's office in a little office building, and he went in, opened the door. The secretary said, who are you? He said, I'd like to be mentored by your boss. And she said, sorry, he doesn't take time for strangers. And she closed the door and he left. And he said, you're not a choice. But he came back the next day and she said the same thing. Rejected him. Again, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many times would you have kept coming back? He said, I came back 17 times. And on the 17th time, secretary felt so bad. She said, listen, I feel bad for you. Do this. He's a busy man. Hide behind the plant by the elevator. And when he walks out, you run up to him, run into the elevator with him, and the doors will close and you'll have a few minutes to talk to him. And my friend did. And I don't know what he said exactly, but he said enough that real estate developer said, you know what? Meet me down at the airport tomorrow at 6 in the morning. I'm taking my private jet down to Florida. We're going to look at some of my hotel properties. I'll start showing you what I know. And he did. And that grew and grew and grew until hundreds of millions of dollars had flown into my business, this person's bank account over the years, over the decades. You see, it all started with persistence. So if you're writing this down, you can't be too picky in the sense that you can't look for infallibility. And you must be persistent. Nothing is impossible to you who will try. Remember what Woody Allen says about success. Half of success is just showing up. What he meant by that is, Woody Allen is Academy Award director, actor in all these movies. And he's like, half of the reason I'm successful is I just show up. He doesn't mean show up one time. He's saying continually showing up year in, year out. Dane Cook, one of the top comedians in the world, is here in Hollywood, and I see him a lot down here on Sunset. And he always says, he's like, everybody wants to be me, but they forget I came to this town at 18 years old, and I really didn't hit it big till 37 or 38 years old, doing comedy at little, horrible, nobody's there places. And he built it up. He built that thing up until he was selling out stadiums, Madison Square Garden. Half the success is just showing up. My friend showed up 17 times. You're going to have to do the same. Now, our practical tip here, I recommend you set 18-month goals. From today, 18 months, you might not have a mentor next week. At least not an in-person one, okay? An 18-month in-person goal. It's just like a friendship. Good mentors are busy. Good mentors sometimes have been burned before. They need some time, right? If there was a girl you were interested, you wouldn't run right up to her and say, will you marry me? Or a guy, that's a good way to be alone the rest of your life. Nobody wants that level of intrusion into their privacy. But if you meet someone and you think they're the right person, it's realistic to say, 18 months from now, I might be in a long-term relationship or I might be married. It's the same with the mentor. So writing that down, that's the next point. Take this slow. Set an 18-month goal and slowly execute. Nothing is possible to him who will try, as Alexander the Great said, and nothing is impossible to him who will try over the right period of time. Peter Drucker suggests 18 months is a great time frame for the human mind. It's not too short-sighted, and yet it's not too impossible, to hold out. If you set an 18-year goal, it's just not realistic. Things change too much, Drucker says. So 18 months is realistic. Doesn't mean you can't have any other mentors, okay? Just means for those good, great ones. I had a guy that I coach, and he wanted to be mentored by this guy. I don't want to say the name, you guys would all know, but one of the top people in the industry, in the health industry. And I said, well, take it slow, my friend. Most people just pop in and like, hey, can I take you to dinner? Hey, form a slow relationship. If it's a celebrity person, go to, they do a book signing somewhere, pop in one time. Then 6 months later, if they're doing a show up there. Again, you don't want to come off as a stalker. Just use common sense. It's literally such a common sense approach that I want you to take, that I'm teaching here to mentors. It's a slow thing. Let's say you find somebody who wrote a book. Send them a letter. There's that movie, Fault in Our Stars. Good little movie that I saw recently. And one of the characters, she has cancer, and she read a book by this guy who lives in Denmark or Holland, Netherlands, and she just wrote him a letter, and he wrote back. You'd be surprised. People are like, how do you talk to all these top authors? I'm like, well, half the battle's just showing up. Nothing impossible to even try. Sometimes I just start with a simple email. Then after an email, maybe I interview them and talk to them. And we can give you another practical strategy here along this line. But over time, I become friends with them. And 18 months later, humans need some time to warm up to people. And they warm up to me, and we're friends. Right? And it builds. And if you do it right, it's a never-ending thing. You keep your mentors. Now, they come and go in intensity and how much time they can spend with you. But, Joel Salatin's still in my life. He was just here at my house in Hollywood. Right? You don't have to burn bridges. You keep this thing going forever. Because they're always that much ahead of you. They're always that much older than you. You continually learn from them. Now, practical tip. This is a cool one. I've done a little bit of this, but a real practical one that I got from Roland Lazenby. I interviewed him. He wrote this amazing book on Michael Jordan called Michael Jordan, The Life. And he was a former professor of journalism. And he said, Ty, one of the best ways that I used to teach my students to attract mentors and to get knowledge in their brain is to make a blog or become a freelance journalist for an article, or for a magazine, and say, I'm going to write an article on blankety blank, Woody Allen. I'm interested in being a movie producer, movie director. And then you go out, you contact his press agent, you email him, and you say, hey, Mr. Allen, Woody Allen, I would like to interview you for an article. Now you have a good framework coming in. It's professional. They feel like they get something out of it, right? They're getting a little bit of what's the word I want to say? They're getting some exposure in that case. So interviewing, Roland Lazenby said, is one of the great ways, and people will make time for a little phone interview. Then he said something interesting that I've always done this, is then, okay, after you do the interview, send them a little gift. He said you can't believe how many people forget the gift. Remember the human bias. The cognitive biases in our brain. There's one called Kantian fairness. We want to be fair. Somebody who does something for us, we want to be fair to them. Reciprocal bias. We want to reciprocate. Reward bias. All these gifts that you can do, they work. I was tell the story of Dick Marconi, the founder of Herbalife, the co-founder. These $1 billion guys. And I went to a little talk he did with a small business group, friends of mine. And we were down in Orange County, and he has a Ferrari museum, all these Ferraris up. And I was talking to him afterwards, and I got his card, and I asked that he gave me some cool little tips. And then I went home, and as I always do, I give the card to my secretary, and she sends a gift automatically. I don't even always know what it is. I learned this tip. Native Americans used to do this in the northwestern Indian. They used to have a potlatch where they go to war with gifts. One chief trying to outdo the other chief, bigger dinners and bigger lunches. It'd be a great world, right? If the whole world was going to war with gifts, well, that's what they would do. And in the same sense, I'm not going to war, but it's part of the same principle. People, when you do something for them, they feel like they need to do something for you. And so one day it was a surreal moment. I was down in the Mondrian Hotel, if you've ever been down on Sunset. And I'm there, and while I'm eating, Bono from U2 was sitting across the street from me, which was pretty funny. But on top of that, okay, while I'm there, the phone rings. And it's a block number, and I pick it up. And usually I don't pick up. I don't know why I picked up the number. I never picked up block number. But I was like, something felt like I should pick it up. And I'm like, is this Ty? That's what the voice said. I'm like, yeah, who is this? And he's like, it's Dick Marconi. Now, Dick Marconi's 70, 80 years old, I think. You know, sold, if you know Herbalife, it's publicly traded, one of the largest companies in the world. He co-founded it. And he said, here he is. I don't even know how he got my number. Maybe I'd put it. He said, did you send me that Ferrari book, coffee table book? And of course, I didn't even know what I had sent him. So I was like, yeah, I sent that to you. And he's like, that is the best gift I've ever gotten. I bought 30 of those books. I bought it for my kids and my family. And Ty, that's just such a great gift. What can I do for you? I want to take you out to dinner. And he's like, come down. I just bought a huge ranch in San Diego. This guy owns thousands of acres in San Diego County. And he's like, I think he told me, I forget what he said, but something like, I just bought a Michelangelo statue. I've got giraffes. Come on down here. You see, that was a potential mentorship forged. How? Well, by this new tip. Okay? I just talked about doing the blog interviews. That's good. But also, you can go to events. You can go places. And you can literally, it's not bribing your way in a negative way. It's not buying affection in a negative way. It's being wise, as the saying goes. Be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. Meaning, you can be slick. That's not slick. Nobody's ever going to fault you and say you're unethical for sending gifts to people. Right? And I'm not talking about political favors. I'm just talking about regular people. You want to mentor you. Send them something. And if a little $5 book doesn't do it, that coffee table book I said to Dick Marconi was an expensive one. I remember, like $60. But you know what? It got a billionaire to call me back. And I didn't even try. Right? This stuff's not rocket science. It's simple. It's not always easy, because some of you have to lower your pride. Some of you have to do things that are counterintuitive. Remember, 67 steps is not about things that are always intuitive. If everything was firing on full cylinders for my brain, my life would be perfect, but it isn't. Evolutionary mismatch and many factors come in that we're going to talk about later in these other 67 steps. Suffice to say that, as you can tell as you listen to this, the importance of mentors, learning through osmosis, the rising tide that will lift you up. Einstein needed it. Jay-Z needed it. Picasso said he liked to steal, not in an unethical way, but he was saying build on the shoulders of giants like Sir Isaac Newton. Well, there's some practical steps you can take. Identify the right person, right? Simple as that. He who shows up wins usually. Send some emails. If you need creative strategies, start a little blog, interview them. Say, I'm going to interview you for my little group here, my little book club I have in my own neighborhood, or this. You'd be surprised. Now, and then I said, be persistent. And then I said, use gifts and some creative strategies. Now, one thing I want you to know, this is important if you're writing this down. The next step is you got to sometimes admit defeat. It's not defeat. I don't like that word, but I'm just using hyperbole here. You have to be willing to give up. It's like The Gambler by Kenny Rogers, that country music song. You have to know when to hold them and when to fold them. You're not going to get every person you try. In fact, my friend who had 17 attempts till he got that real estate developer, he said later, he tried to make a mentor out of one of the top hedge fund guys or money managers. And he said he bought a bicycle and went to Texas because he knew the guy was there and would ride his bike to work. And he said, I would ride my bike to work trying to find this guy, and I would ride up. Finally, I met him one day, and I rode alongside him, and I told him my story. And he said, you know what? That's such a great story. I'm flattered that you're persistent enough to ask me to help you. I'm just too busy right now. And my friend said it was okay. I moved on. You're not going to win them all. So with that in mind, you need to identify 5, maybe 10 potential mentors. We're going to talk later about, who qualifies, but go straight to the top. The best people. Dream big. Think big in this, okay? It's the next thing if you're writing this down about mentor. Think big, right? Go to Oprah Winfrey if you could. Now, but just don't have her as the only person on your list. It's like kind of like when you see my cousin is applying for college. You apply to Harvard, but you also apply to a little bit lower schools and a little bit lower. You don't want to you don't want to be optimist, pessimist. You want to be a realist, right? So understand that Oprah is, while great to try, and once in a while you win the lottery, It's okay if you don't. Because remember, we're thinking in 18-month time frames. And once that 18 months is over, you move to another 18 months. So the goal is just osmosis learning. There's no right or wrong. There's no exact perfect. Oprah Winfrey, theoretically, while being on top of the world, might be better off with somebody like Ellen DeGeneres might be a better one. She might be a little more attainable. And if you can't get Ellen DeGeneres, you just keep going and you get what you can. Remember, beggars can't be choosers. He who is faithful with a little will be faithful with a lot. Okay? So faithful with a little means what? As you get a mentor who's maybe not your number one choice, you will learn how to deal with mentors. I always say, make your mistakes on not your number one choice. Because sometimes the worst thing is to get what you want too fast, because then when you get it, you don't know how to deal with it and you mess it up. Maybe if you got the mentor of your dreams tomorrow, you wouldn't, since it was your first mentor, you wouldn't do it right. So it's better to get and cultivate those skills, because make no mistake, it's a skill to keep a mentor interested in you. People have asked me, well, why would this mentor be interested in me? Well, that's a good question. Sometimes they're willing to just help, but oftentimes they get something out of it. You know, I was mentored by people. I always brought some skills to the table. I also brought, sometimes it was sweat equity. I would do some work for them. You know, Joe Salatin, I worked on his farm, or other times as I got older, I had more knowledge. I had a specialized set of knowledge that they wanted. So it's not always just a one way they're helping you. Oftentimes you can do it. But that's why I say this approach we're taking now in these 67 steps is not just for the next 67 days. This is an overarching mental framework that you must adopt and implement, not just for today, not just for tomorrow, but for the next 30 years. I want to end as we talk about this by one important area, some pitfalls. I've talked about these a little bit, about being too picky, but now I want to talk about not pitfalls with you, not mistakes you can make, but mistakes and warning signs with mentors. Just remember, mentors are humans. They can change. Sometimes you need to withdraw from the relationship. If you read the obvious signs, there might be a relationship that is no longer in the best interest for either one of you. And that can happen for various reasons. Sometimes I see this with women. You know, if you're a pretty woman, you're listening to this, and you get a guy to be your mentor. Eventually, sometimes the guy falls for you, and maybe he makes you feel weird. You're not attracted to him. You just move on. Remember I said blue-footed booby birds. That's the other day we talked about this. The changeability. Just change. You don't have to see it as black and white. I see people get all traumatized. Oh, I was with this person and it didn't work out. Nothing works out perfectly. Everything comes to an end. It's okay. End's not good or bad. It's just the natural circle and progressions of life. Think about spring, summer, fall, winter. When's the end and when's the beginning? There is none. But there is at the same time. And that's the dichotomy. A circle, in a sense, never ends, but you can only go around the circle so many times as a human. And eventually, we're gone. So don't look at this thing with mentors as like, ooh, I failed, or I didn't fail. Oh, it was in a relationship, but then the mentor started acting weird, or oh, I found out some information about them and I didn't quite think they were on par for what I'm looking for. That's okay. That's one loop around the circle of life. You're going to have to loop around that circle 10,000 times. It's not a failure. You move forward. Never think that way, black and white. Don't think with the black and white, archaic, moralistic mind. There are absolute morals. I'm not a complete subjectivist into subjectivism completely. It's, don't kill puppies and don't steal and some of those basic things. But I'm saying, when it comes to this, you don't have to see this as a massive upheaval in your life and, oh, I wasted years. You could waste, don't waste too much time. There's a fine line between staying too long, like I said, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. That's the biggest pitfall that I see. People staying past the time where it's obvious this mentor, it's not a winning situation for both of you. Okay? Very important. Another pitfall potential. You want a mentor, although they might not have a lot of time to give you some real instruction. You don't want, like, people get caught in these internships where they never even see the person. That's not exactly a mentorship. You need somebody Sometimes they can give you an hour a month, sometimes an hour a quarter. But if they can only give you an hour every 5 years, that's probably not a mentor. That's probably just, blah, blah, like an advisor. Okay? Now, next kind of pitfall, but kind of piece of advice that I want to leave you with. Books. Because people ask me, Ty, should these mentors all be in person? Law of 33%. Where I live, there are no great people. Or I'm too young. I don't know anyone. I don't know. So books are part of a recipe for good soup. We'll call it the mentor soup. You don't want just one thing in your soup. If your good chicken noodle soup has some chicken, some noodles, some broth, it has some salt in it, some pepper, it has some chicken, it has some carrots and celery, and this nice ingredients gives you a nice soup. When it comes to mentors, the predominant form of mentor ideally is in person because you learn by osmosis. But as you're moving through time, things are changing, might not be perfect for you. You might be in a place where you're traveling a lot or whatever. You can substitute effectively up to a certain point with things. I think that I love YouTube books. I love YouTube videos because YouTube videos, you can pick up the mannerisms. Watch every YouTube video. It's free. Okay? And that could be a percentage. Sometimes it'll be more. Sometimes I think it goes in phases. Sometimes I'll have just in-person mentors. Sometimes I'm in a dry spell knowing the person is around and I do more audio. And then, of course, books. The beauty of books is, as Charlie Munger says, you can make friends with the eminent dead. These are people no longer alive. Like Jeff Bezos from Amazon.com. He was, in a sense, mentored by Sam Walton, although I don't think he ever met him. He just read his book. But again, books serve many purposes. Their purpose is not necessarily to replace mentors. These things all augment, and it's this nice symbiosis where the group is greater than one individual. But I want you, for the sake of this specific talk, to find some in-person people. Okay? Litmus test. Go slowly. Feel it out, both for them and for you. Don't dive in. Sometimes I see people as pitfall. They pick the wrong mentors. It's not really somebody who should be a mentor. And we're going to talk about this in another one, but I'm going to end by just saying the other pitfall is not going far enough up the chain. Get the best. Start with the top. Start with the President of the United States. Send an email. Won't hurt. The White House gets lots of them. Whoever you consider the pinnacle. Start there and keep your list. And keep your eyes hungry. Nothing's impossible to him to try. He was diligent, or she was diligent in their work. They will stand before kings, not before average people. You might not get the president today, but I bet you if you stick with it, you'd be surprised. Like Woody Allen said, half of the success is just showing up. My friend got Elon Musk. I've gotten many amazing people that would blow your mind. Sometimes I'm amazed that the fact that these people want to be, want to spend time with me and teach me. Remember, it should be reciprocal. Sometimes that can be gifts. That can be a little flattery. I find a little flattery to be effective. It's just when you meet them in person, keep it succinct, keep it short what you're about to say. So be writing this down too. Don't necessarily say, "Hey, my name's Ty, will you help me?" Like that. Try to give. Reward, reward, reward. I call it the 3-to-1 ratio. 3 gives for 1 reward. I was at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting sitting next to a guy, and he asked me a question about Google AdWords, and I gave him the answer, and I didn't realize who I was talking about. One of the wealthiest men in Germany. And I gave, and he's like, "Oh, come," and all this mentoring and knowledge that I'm going to get from him because I gave. Reciprocal, then people give back, right? And I've cultivated a relationship over time. I didn't get too anxious. It wasn't like, I want to marry you, I want to be my mentor. Don't be desperate. Clingy is not attractive. Take a long-term time frame, and if you stick with things long enough, you will generally almost always get what you want. You need to be interesting. The 67 steps is going to help you be more interesting. No one wants to mentor somebody that they don't see the potential there. You need to increase your reading. Makes you more interesting to go to dinner with. You got to wow people. You don't want any death by faint praise. I talk about that later. You're going to learn. where it's not enough to just be, yeah, he's pretty good. You want that mentor to be like, there's something about that person. I'm willing to spend a little bit of my time. I want to double down on that person. It's like an investment, and that's a good investment. You want that to be said about you, and that you need to give off signs. You need to give off, there needs to be inclinations that, wow, this is an amazing person. Books are an easy way to do that. So books aren't always my mentors, but they sometimes prepare me for mentors. Sometimes they are. Many books that I was just reading, Will Durant, he's dead. So I can only have his books. It's not even much on video. You find that blend for you, but make sure it includes a heavy dose of in-person. Make sure it's 4 or 5 hours a day. Now, some people say to me, Ty, I got a full-time job, I can't do that. Well, it doesn't have to be all in one day. If it's 4 or 5 hours a day and you can only do it on the weekends, well, that's great. If you miss 5 days, then you can spend 1 day with them. Now, again, this is a rule of thumb. Start now, if this is hard with you, with 5 minutes. And work your way up, like bench pressing. You start bench pressing the bar, 45 pounds. The next thing you know, you're like the guy who does security at my door. He benches 550 pounds, but he started out with the bar like everybody. So start out with 5 minutes with people ahead of you. If you are working in a company and you don't like those people who are around you because they're dragging you down, it's too much. It's not the law of 33%. You're always with people below you. Ask for ask for a transfer. Move to a department where there's potential mentors there. Remember, you will accumulate many mentors. And some mentors would be specific. Some are just, I have some mentors, I don't want to be like them in business, but, they're personal trainers and they're in great shape, health-wise. So you can be picky. You can have pick and choose and make this recipe of mentor. All right, this is my mentor on this. This person has a marriage for 50 years that's so healthy. I want to be around them when it comes to love, but I don't really like their business, so I'm going to get a business mentor. It's okay. There's no hard and fast rules. Remember, there's only ESS. There's only opposite and equal reactions. So for everything you do, there'll be an offset. Make sure you like the outcome. But overall, never forget that you will learn by osmosis. And if you hitch your wagon to the right horse, if you get on the right boat and that tide is going up, these mentors will bring you up and it will be easier. It will not be like sitting in a classroom just learning from books while a boring lecture is being given by some professor who doesn't care. Forge long-lasting relationships. Be reciprocal. Be interesting. The Dalai Lama needed a mentor, so do you. Watch the movie Karate Kid and watch how the framework unfolds for a good mentorship. Start thinking about your day, right? How many hours did you spend? There's an app that I downloaded. There's some different ones. You can try this app. Let me see if I can find it here. It's called A Time Logger. It's scary when you start just log 33%. How much time every day spent with people below me, on my level, and ahead of me. You will be amazed. It's like, oh man, I'm spending all my days. If you're an entrepreneur, this can be horrible because you're just working with people that are maybe employees. You don't have anyone above you. Remember, it's not a elitist when I say above. It's beyond where you are. So the more successful you get, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're very successful, just understand, the more successful you get, the harder this gets because there's less people that are 10 or 20 years ahead of you. But don't let that be disabling ignorance. You can still do it. There's always somebody better. Even if you're Michael Jordan, the best basketball player, 3 years later, somebody's going to be better when you start to get older. Right? Remember what Charlie Munger, the self-made billionaire, says. I believe in the discipline in mastering the best of others. I don't believe in just sitting in a room and trying to think it all up yourself. Nobody is that smart. So I want you to write this down now, both on this page as the comment, and then you can write this in your private journal and you can elaborate further. Okay. Who are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 potential mentors? Write their name. If you're doing it here publicly on the site and you don't want to do the full name, just put their first name. Okay? And then, secondly, a simple plan on how you're going to start cultivating a relationship over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 18 months that ends in them helping you be part of the rising tide, their rising tide, learning through osmosis, copying and stealing from the greats, them. who are those people and what's your strategy? For some of you, it's like, well, I already know the people. I work for them. I need to talk to my boss if I can transfer over to their department. Or for some of you, it's, yeah, there's this guy who owns a restaurant chain or owns a gym or owns an internet company. I'm going to go spend some time with them. Okay? For others, you might be like, I already don't know them. I'm going to go to a conference that they're across the country. I'm going to write them a letter. I'm going to send them a great gift. I'm going to send them a car. People say, oh, that's crazy. Send somebody a car you don't know. Well, hey, depends on how much you value your life. If they gave you one nugget of information, it might make you $1,000,000. All right? So for you, who are the people? And in your private journal, that pen and paper, write out specific names. Write out A-listers, B-listers, C-listers. I don't mean actors, but I mean literally your top priority, second, and third. And then just some concrete strategies. It can be books. It can be gifts. And I want you to be writing this specifically about in-person mentors, okay? Not just books. Books are always there. You should always have books, no matter how many mentors you have. All right, so write those down, complete this lesson, move on to the next step, and also get that in your journal. Don't underestimate that power of that journal. 3-ring binder, pieces of paper, stick it in your closet, on your bookshelf. Write in it once a week. I mean, for the 67 steps, you're going to be writing in more, but continue to write in it longer and longer. It will help you. Jeff Bezos did it. Many people. Richard Branson from Virgin Airlines, Virgin Records did it. Okay? So complete that on the page too, and I am excited that you're here with us. We're continuing to learn 67 steps. Stay tuned tomorrow for the next one. Thanks so much.